At 11:52 p.m. on July 22nd, 1991, the apartment that had been screaming in silence finally spoke, through a Polaroid and a pair of severed hands in the fridge. I still taste the air of that hallway, thick, sweet, wrong, like copper pennies dissolved in warm milk. And the click that followed, that metallic kiss of the door sealing shut, still clangs inside my skull every time I close my own fridge at home. I wasn't supposed to be there, not really. I was just the note-taker, the fly on the wall with a badge and a weak stomach. But the moment Detective Mueller pushed open apartment 219, the smell punched me so hard I staggered. It wasn't rotting meat, though that's what rookies always say. No, this was deeper, older. Imagine wet earth stuffed into a hot car trunk for weeks, then sprayed with cheap vanilla air freshener that only makes it worse. Mueller stepped inside first. His silhouette blocked the bulb, and for a heartbeat, the doorway looked like a mouth ready to swallow him. Then the Polaroid slipped. It spun like a dying leaf, landing face up at my boots. I didn't want to look. My eyes betrayed me. Two pale hands, neatly severed at the wrist, rested on what looked like a glass shelf, smeared with syrup-thick blood. Behind me, Officer Ramirez whispered a prayer so quiet I felt it more than heard it. Madre de Dios. I understood every syllable. The apartment exhaled, a low, wet sigh that rattled the blinds. I swear the walls themselves were breathing. We moved as if underwater. Each step sucked at our shoes, the carpet squelching like it was soaked through. Mueller clicked on his maglite. The beam speared the darkness and found the kitchenette. Stainless steel fridge, standard issue, but dented along the bottom like something had kicked it from inside. I watched his gloved hand reach for the handle. Time folded, seconds stretched until I could hear my own pulse in my ears, a drum solo of dread. The door cracked open with a sigh, colder than any winter wind I've known. Fog rolled out, carrying that cloying sweetness, mixed with something sharp, almost citrus. Mueller's flashlight swept across the shelves. Jars, plastic bags, a blue Tupperware stained red at the rim. Then the second Polaroid. This one taped to the butter compartment. Butter. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I leaned closer. The image was fogged by cold, but I could make out the curve of a scalp, dark hair matted and frozen to the skull beneath. Somewhere behind me, Ramirez retched softly. I didn't blame him. My own stomach flipped like a pancake on a hot griddle. Mueller's voice was steady, but I caught the tremor. We need photos before anything moves. He stepped back, letting the door swing wider. That's when I saw the date, scrawled on a scrap of masking tape stuck to the top shelf. July 17th, 5 days ago. 5 days. Those hands had been waiting for us, patient as saints. I forced myself to breathe through my mouth, but the taste only worsened, like licking a battery coated in vanilla frosting. My notebook shook in my grip. Mueller clicked his radio. We've got a code black, multiple pieces, requesting CSU and the coroner. His words were calm, but his eyes screamed. The fridge hummed, a low mechanical lullaby that made my skin crawl. I imagined it singing to the hands, promising to keep them safe until someone came looking. I glanced at the hallway behind us. The doorway looked smaller now, like the apartment had already begun digesting us. I wondered if we'd get out with our sanity intact. Mueller gestured for me to step aside. As I did, my foot nudged something under the edge of the counter. Another Polaroid. I bent, heart hammering. This one was newer, glossy. A face, no, half a face, eyes open, flash reflecting off the corneas like coins dropped in a wishing well. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the counter, palm landing in something sticky. I didn't look down. The apartment wasn't just speaking now. It was laughing at us, one frozen snapshot at a time. And the worst part? We hadn't even opened the freezer yet. I stumbled backward out of the kitchenette, the sticky residue on my palm now a second skin of dread. The fridge door creaked wider, as if the apartment itself was inviting me deeper into its secrets. But I couldn't stay in that kitchen, not with the Polaroids staring up at me like frozen witnesses. My feet carried me toward the hallway, toward whatever lived beyond that threshold. The corridor breathed. I swear it did. Each step I took seemed to inhale, the walls expanding slightly like lungs filling with something unspeakable. The smell hit me again, that cocktail of rot and industrial disinfectant that had been following me since I first crossed the threshold. Mrs. Thompson from 2 doors down later told me she'd smelled it too. Like someone trying to cover up something that couldn't be covered, she'd said, her voice dropping to whisper, a whisper so low I barely caught the words. She'd been trying to mask her own tears with that whisper. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. Apartments in this building weren't supposed to have corridors like this. Oh, maybe it was the darkness playing tricks, but each door I passed seemed to lean inward, listening. Behind 214, I heard what sounded like breathing. Not human breathing, but something wetter, more deliberate. Or maybe that was just my imagination running wild with the stories I'd heard. The superintendent had mentioned tenants complaining about noises at night. Just the pipes, he'd insisted, but his eyes had darted away when he said it. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling the wallpaper's texture, raised flowers that had long since lost their pattern to moisture and time. The disinfectant smell grew stronger as I moved toward the bathroom. Someone had been trying to clean. Trying so hard that the bleach fumes made my eyes water, but underneath it, that sweet, rotting stench persisted like a melody you can't shake. Mr. Kowalski from upstairs once knocked on Dahmer's door about the smell. He smiled, Kowalski told me later, and said he'd just had some bad meat. But his smile, something was off about it, like he knew exactly what I was smelling and found it funny. My hand found the bathroom doorknob, cold metal that seemed to pulse under my touch. The moment I wrapped my fingers around it, I felt it. A subtle vibration, like something inside was moving, just slightly. Like someone had just stepped away from the door, or something had just settled back into place. I pulled my hand away as if burned, wiping it compulsively on my jeans. The fabric came away damp, though I couldn't tell if it was from my own sweat or something else entirely. The corridor had its own soundtrack. Somewhere in the building, water dripped with the rhythm of a dying heartbeat. Each drop echoed down the hallway like a countdown. I found myself counting them, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, until I realized I was matching my breathing to their cadence. That's when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong to pipes or settling buildings. A soft scraping, deliberate and slow, coming from behind the wall itself. I pressed my ear to the plaster, feeling its cold breath against my skin. The scraping stopped. Of course it did. Buildings don't breathe, walls don't listen. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the corridor was holding its breath with me, waiting to see what I'd do next. Mrs. Chen from across the hall had stories about this place. She'd lived here since the 70s, seen tenants come and go. Some left in the middle of the night, she told me, her English careful and precise. No goodbye, no forwarding address. Just gone. And always, a few days later, that smell would get worse, like whatever they were running from finally caught up with them. The floorboards under my feet felt spongy, giving slightly with each step. I wondered how many feet had walked this same path, how many had felt that same instinct to turn back. But turning back wasn't an option anymore. The corridor had become a throat, and I was sliding down it whether I wanted to or not. The disinfectant smell grew clawing, mixing with something metallic that made my stomach turn. That's when I noticed the doors. Each apartment had a peephole, but from this side, they looked like tiny black eyes watching me pass. And something else. Every single doorknob had the same dark stain around the base, as if countless hands had reached for those handles with the same trembling uncertainty I felt now. I heard footsteps then. Not mine. Heavier, dragging slightly. They seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, echoing in a way that made it impossible to tell their source. My own footsteps had gone silent, as if the corridor was absorbing them, taking them into itself. The breathing sound returned, closer now, and I realized it was coming from the vent above my head. Something was in the ventilation system, moving through the building's veins like a sickness. The end of the corridor should have been 20 feet away, but it seemed to recede with each step. Classic horror movie stuff, right? Except this wasn't a movie, and the smell was getting worse, richer. Like whatever was rotting had decided to ripen all at once. I could taste it now, coppery and sweet, coating the back of my throat like a second tongue. My hand reached for the wall again, seeking something solid in this increasingly liquid space. The wallpaper peeled away under my touch, revealing older layers beneath. Newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, fragments of headlines about missing persons. That's when I heard it, the sound that would follow me out of that building and into every nightmare I'd have for years after. A soft thump from apartment 219. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a sound like something heavy settling into place. Something that had been waiting. Clears throat. And then the unmistakable click of a lock turning from the inside. Someone, or something, was home. The sound of that lock clicking shut echoed down the hallway like a heartbeat, steady, final, and somehow hungry. I stood there, hand still on the peeling wallpaper, my palm damp with sweat and something else I didn't want to think about. The corridor didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it had eyes. And somewhere behind the walls, something was listening. I didn't move. Not yet. I just stood there, breathing through my mouth like that would help. Like the smell couldn't crawl inside me if I didn't let it. But it already had. It clung to the back of my throat, thick and sweet and wrong, like meat left out in the sun. Not rancid, not at first. Just off. Like someone had tried to cover it with bleach and flowers and only made it worse. That was the first time I almost knocked. Almost. My knuckles hovered inches from the door, trembling like I was cold even though the air was thick and wet. I told myself it was nothing. Just a neighbor. Just a bad smell. But my hand wouldn't move. It just hung there, frozen, like my body knew what my brain hadn't caught up to yet. I remember the way the hallway smelled that day. Not just the pork sweet rot, but underneath it, something metallic, like pennies left in a hot car, like the inside of a mouth after a tooth comes out. I'd smelled it before, years ago, when my cousin got his nose broken in a fight. Blood has a smell, a memory, and this was close, too close. I stepped back, just one step, but it felt like falling. My heel hit the baseboard, and I swear the wall behind me gave a little, like it was breathing. I didn't look. I didn't want to see what was behind the wallpaper. I just turned and walked, fast, like if I moved quick enough, the smell wouldn't follow me. But it did. It clung to my hair, my clothes, the inside of my nose. I could still taste it hours later, like it had crawled into my sinuses and made a home. That night, I scrubbed my skin raw in the shower. I used bleach on my fingernails. I burned the shirt I wore. But the smell didn't leave. It just changed, got sweeter, like something ripening, like fruit gone soft. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall that shared a pipe with 219, and I listened. 3 days later, I saw her, Pamela Bass. She lived across the hall, diagonal from me, right next to 219. She was carrying a trash bag down the stairs, moving slow, like her knees hurt. I remember her eyes, red and glassy, like she'd been crying, or hadn't slept, or both. She looked at me and didn't smile, just nodded. That was the first time I thought maybe it wasn't just me. I asked her, casual as I could, "You smell that?" She stopped, mid-step, one hand on the railing, the other clutching that trash bag like it was full of bricks. She didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead. Then she said, soft as anything, "I don't ask questions anymore." And she walked away. I didn't sleep that night either. I kept thinking about her face, the way her voice cracked, the way she didn't blink, and I kept thinking about the smell. It was stronger now, like it had spread, like it was seeping through the vents, under the doors, into the walls. I started checking the locks twice, 3 times. I stopped using the peephole. I didn't want to see what might be looking back. A week later, I heard her again. Pamela, crying, not loud. Just soft, muffled sobs through the wall. I pressed my ear to the plaster, and I swear I heard something else. A low hum, like a fridge running, or something breathing. I don't know which was worse. I wanted to knock, just once, just to ask if she was okay. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I knew what was on the other side of her wall. And I knew what I might hear if I got too close. So I stood there, in my socks, listening to her cry, and the building groan, and the smell get thicker, until I couldn't tell if it was coming from the vents or from inside my own head. And then, one morning, the crying stopped. Just like that. No more sobs, no more hum, just silence. I told myself maybe she moved, maybe she got out, maybe she was safe. But the smell didn't leave. It stayed. It grew. And the next time I passed 219, I saw something new. A small stain under the door. Dark. Wet. Still spreading. And I knew it wasn't pork. I didn't knock that time. I didn't even stop. I just walked, fast, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. But I felt it. Behind me. Watching. Waiting. Like the hallway had teeth now. And somewhere, just beneath the smell, I swear I heard it again. That soft thump, like something heavy settling into place, like something had just gotten comfortable. I didn't stop walking until the hallway bent left, and the light behind me died completely. The dark swallowed every echo, every breath, every footstep. Then I heard it. Bare feet slapping wet concrete, fast, like something small and terrified was running straight at me. My stomach flipped, because I knew that sound. Kids. Always kids. And tonight, the kid was screaming without making a sound. I turned the corner, just as a shape burst through the fire door. 14, maybe 15, skin the color of late summer dusk, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat and something darker. His wrists, oh, his wrists, looked like raw meat wrapped in torn bedsheets. He saw me, and his eyes went wider than the moon. "Help!" he rasped, the word half air, half sob. He said he'd let me call home. I should have grabbed him right then. Should have wrapped my coat around those shaking shoulders and dragged him straight to the blue lights 3 blocks north. Instead, I froze. Because I recognized the smell leaking out behind him. Copper pennies and freezer burn. The same smell that had been haunting my dreams since the day I moved in. The boy staggered past me, leaving wet prints that steamed in the cold. He didn't look back. Couldn't. I followed, heart kicking my ribs, telling myself it was just instinct. Yeah, right. More like the same morbid gravity that pulls people to car wrecks. Every step I took, the alley seemed to stretch longer, the shadows thicker, until the apartment building behind us felt like a mouth trying to close. He collapsed beside a dumpster, knees skidding through broken glass. I knelt, reached for his shoulder, and he flinched so hard I thought his bones might snap. "It's okay," I whispered, but my voice cracked like cheap plywood. "You're safe now." Safe. What a stupid word. We were still on the same block, still breathing the same sour air that had bled out of apartment 219. He tried to speak again, but the words tangled on whatever nightmare he'd just crawled out of. Something about photos, about a drill, about a man who smiled like a father and locked doors like a warden. I caught only fragments, each one colder than the last. When I pressed my palm to his back, I felt his heartbeat racing against my fingers, a trapped bird throwing itself at the bars. That's when the alley filled with sirens. Not for us, not yet. They were blocks away, chasing some other horror across the river. But the boy heard them, and his whole body went rigid. "No police," he choked out. He said they'd never believe me. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but the taste of that lie burned my tongue. I peeled off my own flannel shirt and wound it around his arms, knotting the sleeves tight enough to slow the bleeding. Every layer revealed new bruises, handprints, ligature lines, the sickly yellow of old damage blooming under fresh red. I could feel the heat coming off him, fever and terror mixed into something radioactive. Somewhere inside my head, a voice whispered, "You're touching evidence." But I couldn't let go. Not yet. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the alley, slow and deliberate. Not running, not panicked, just coming. The boy heard them too and shrank into the brick like he could melt through it. I stood, heart hammering so loud I swear the dumpsters vibrated. The silhouette that stepped under the street lamp was tall, calm, carrying a white plastic bag that swung like a pendulum. I couldn't see his face, didn't need to. I knew the shape of that patience, the way it dripped casual menace. The boy tugged my sleeve. "That's him," he breathed. The words barely missed in the air. He told me I could leave, after the pictures. I felt my stomach drop through the soles of my shoes. Pictures. Plural. Meaning there were others. Meaning this wasn't over. I stepped sideways, putting my body between the boy and the approaching man. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "He's with me now." The man stopped 10 feet away, head tilting like a curious dog. Soft, almost polite. "Officer," he said, calm as Sunday dinner, "that child is confused. He's been drinking." "I was just taking him home." I felt the boy trembling against my back, fingers digging into my belt loops like I was the last solid thing on earth. The man took another step, smile widening. "Really?" he murmured. "You don't want to make a scene." And that's when I noticed the smell again, drifting off the bag like perfume from hell. Copper. Cold, familiar. Sirens swelled. Closer now, maybe 2 blocks. The man's eyes flicked toward the sound. Just a twitch, but enough. I grabbed the boy's hand and ran. Glass crunched under my boots, the alley narrowing until the sky disappeared. Behind us, a single word followed, soft as a lullaby. Konarak. We burst onto the sidewalk just as a squad car screeched around the corner. I waved frantically, shouting something incoherent, but the boy yanked free and bolted across the street, bare feet slapping asphalt. I started after him, but the cruiser's headlights pinned me like a moth. Doors opened, voices shouted, and when I turned back to point at the alley, it was empty. No man, no bag, just the smell hanging in the air like a ghost that refuses to leave. The officers asked questions I couldn't answer fast enough. I told them about the boy, the wrists, the apartment. One cop radioed for backup. The other gave me a look that said, "Not another nutcase." I wanted to scream. Instead, I breathed through my mouth and tried not to taste the truth. They found him 2 streets over, collapsed again, this time under a different light. Konarak Synthesomphone, 14 years old. Wrists bound with the exact same blue-striped sheet I'd seen flapping from the fire escape days earlier. They took my statement. They took him to the hospital. They took the man's word that everything was a misunderstanding, and then they gave the boy back. I watched from behind the yellow tape as the same calm man signed forms with neat, looping handwriting. He smiled at the officers, thanked them, promised to keep a better eye on his boyfriend. Nobody asked why a 31-year-old man was dating a 14-year-old child. Nobody asked about the smell. Nobody asked me anything else at all. I walked home alone, past the alley, past the dumpsters, past the spot where a boy had begged me to believe him. The building looked the same. The hallway smelled worse. And somewhere inside apartment 219, I swear I heard that soft thump again. Like something heavy settling into place. Like something had just gotten comfortable. Like it was waiting for the next knock. I swear the hallway had its own heartbeat that night. A slow, wet pulse that pushed the stench of 219 right through the keyholes and into my lungs. I pressed my back against the opposite wall, hugging the shadows, because I couldn't stand the thought of walking past that door again. Somewhere behind it, I'd heard the thump, soft, deliberate, like a body being laid down on carpet so nobody downstairs would notice. And then came the voices. 2 officers stepped out of the elevator, polished shoes squeaking on linoleum, badges glinting under the dying light. Between them walked the boy, same hollow eyes, same trembling knees, but now his wrists were wrapped in plastic cuffs that looked almost gentle next to the bruises blooming up his arms. One cop held him by the elbow like a father escorting a sleepy child. The other carried a clipboard, flipping pages with the lazy boredom of someone who'd already decided what the paperwork would say. I felt the air leave my chest in one long, useless rush. They hadn't even taken him to the hospital, just to the squad car, where they asked him questions I couldn't hear through the glass. Now they were bringing him back. "Evening," the taller officer said to the man who appeared in the doorway of 219. He wore a clean white t-shirt and the kind of polite smile you give a neighbor whose cat you just ran over. The boy stared at the floor, lips moving, no sound coming out. "He's just drunk," the man explained, voice syrupy, almost musical. "My little brother gets this way. Wandered off again." "Thank you for finding him." The clipboard officer nodded, satisfied. "No problem, Mr. Dahmer. Happens. Kid needs to learn his limits." I stepped forward before I knew what I was doing. "Officer," I said, my voice cracking like an old record. "That boy isn't his brother. He was begging me to call." The taller cop raised a hand, palm out, like he was stopping traffic. "Sir, we've got this handled. Go back to your apartment." "But, sir," the word carried a weight that pressed me back against the wall. My mouth tasted of pennies and something rotten. The boy looked at me then, one quick, desperate flick of the eyes, before the man in the white t-shirt placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him inside. The door closed with a polite click, the kind of sound a librarian makes shelving the last book of the night. And just like that, the corridor went still, as if the building itself had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. The officers turned, already chuckling about the paperwork, already halfway to the elevator. "Poor kid's gonna have one hell of a hangover," one said. The other slapped his shoulder, and their voices dwindled down the stairwell until only the fluorescent buzz remained. I stayed rooted to the spot, counting heartbeats, counting breaths, counting the seconds until something moved behind that door again. Nothing did. The silence felt heavier than any scream. I thought about pounding on the wood, about screaming until the whole floor woke up, about dialing emergency services from the payphone downstairs. But I could already hear the conversation. "You're calling about what now?" "A neighbor bringing his brother home?" They'd hang up before I finished the sentence, so I did the only thing that felt real. I pressed my ear to the painted surface and listened. At first, there was only the dull thud of my own pulse. Then, faint, came the scrape of furniture being shifted, the soft clink of glass, the low murmur of a voice trying to soothe, trying to hush. "It's okay," the man was saying. "Just a little longer, just a little drink." My stomach turned. I tasted bile. I pictured the boy's eyes again, wide, wet, pleading, and I knew I'd remember them until the day I died. Somewhere behind that door, those eyes were closing. Somewhere behind that door, the night was being rewritten into something nobody would want to read. Footsteps approached from the other side. I jerked away, heart hammering so loud I was sure the walls could hear. The lock turned, slow, deliberate. I braced for the door to swing open, for the man to look out and see me standing there like a fool. But it didn't. Instead, the hallway light above me flickered twice and went out. Total darkness, pressed in, thick as velvet, soaked in oil. For a moment I couldn't tell which way led back to the stairwell, which way led deeper into the maze of identical doors. I backed away, hands out, until my shoulder blades met the far wall. My fingers brushed something sticky. Old paint, old secrets, maybe something worse. I didn't wipe them off. I deserved the stain. Somewhere inside 219, a soft thump echoed again. This time, it was followed by a gentle, almost tender click. I stood there until the bulb overhead sputtered back to life, revealing nothing but the same stained carpet, the same peeling walls, the same closed door. No screams, no sirens, just the smell, stronger now, curling into my nose like a question I was too afraid to answer. I turned toward the stairwell, legs shaking, and started the long descent. Behind me, the corridor stayed silent, but I knew with the certainty of someone who just watched a ghost walk through a wall, that the night in 219 had only just begun. And as I pushed open the exit door to the alley, the cold air hit my face like a slap, carrying with it something else, something sweet, something spoiled, something that clung to my clothes and whispered, "You'll be back." I looked up at the building one last time. Every window was dark except for one. 219. The curtain moved, just enough for me to see the silhouette of a man standing there, watching. I didn't wait to see if he waved. The chill followed me like a stray dog, right up the fire stairs, back through the service door, back into the hall that smelled of boiled hot dogs and bleach. I told myself I was only checking, just a glance, just to be sure the kid had really made it out. But my feet kept moving, one after another, until I stood in front of 219 again. The peephole was dark, yet I felt the weight of an eye on the other side, pressing, waiting. I should have turned around. I didn't. The hallway narrowed the longer I stared, like the walls were leaning in to listen. Somewhere behind that door, water ran, then stopped, then ran again, irregular, like someone deciding whether to wash their hands. I lifted my knuckles, hesitated, felt the cold sweat bead at my hairline. The lock clicked from inside before I could knock, a soft invitation wrapped in a threat. The door drifted open an inch, no more, and the aquarium glow leaked out, pulsing, the color of deep ocean and bruised skin. The smell rolled over me first, sweet copper, wet pennies, the spoiled melon stench I remembered from the alley, but stronger now, intimate, like it had been waiting for me to breathe it in. I pushed the door wider. The room beyond was a cavern of blue shadows, the only sound the low hum of filters and the soft cluck of water against glass. A couch sat against the far wall, its cushions sunken and dark. On the coffee table, a pair of handcuffs glinted, open, patient. I heard my own pulse, loud, ridiculous, like someone tapping a microphone. A shape moved behind the tank, distorted by water and light, tall, thin, slow. I couldn't see a face, just the suggestion of shoulders, the tilt of a head. "Close the door," the shape said, not loud, not angry, more like a teacher reminding a student of the rules. My hand obeyed before my brain caught up. The latch snicked shut, final as a judge's gavel. The air thickened. Every breath tasted of rust and fish food. I took one step, then another, carpet squishing under my shoes. Damp, warm, wrong. That's when I saw the boy. He sat on a low stool in a corner, wrists resting on his knees, metal cuffs already circling them, like silver bracelets waiting to be kissed shut. His t-shirt was white once, now abstract art in red and brown. Head down, hair hanging over his eyes. He didn't look up, didn't beg. I wanted to say something heroic, something loud, but the words stuck to my tongue like peanut butter. The tall man glided forward, blocking my view, and I noticed the needle in his hand, catching the blue light, a single dewdrop trembling at its tip. He turned to me, or at least his chin did. The rest stayed perfectly still, like a statue rotating on a base. "You came back," he said, voice soft, almost friendly. "That means you're curious. Curious people make the best audience." He gestured toward the boy with the needle, a conductor introducing the soloist. I tasted bile, sharp and citrus at the back of my throat. The boy lifted his head then, just enough for me to see his eyes, wide, glassy, already somewhere else. "He ran before," the man continued, "but running is just delayed acceptance." He stepped aside, revealing a second pair of cuffs on the floor, open, inviting. "You can leave after the show," he said, "but first, you watch." I shook my head, a tiny motion, more twitch than decision. The man's shoulders lifted in a shrug that looked borrowed from someone who cared less. He knelt beside the boy, needle poised above the soft inner arm. The aquarium bubbled, a lonely sound, as if the fish were gossiping. I counted heartbeats, mine, his, the boy's. Hard to tell whose was whose anymore. The needle descended. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. "You're gonna be my zombie," the man whispered, almost tender, like a lullaby lyric. The plunger pushed, slow, deliberate. Blue light caught the liquid, turning it momentarily into liquid sky before it vanished under the skin. The boy exhaled, a long, ragged sound, half sigh, half moan, and slumped forward, forehead nearly touching his own knees. The man stroked the back of his neck once, twice, then stood, turning to me again. He raised the empty syringe like a toast. "Now," he said, "we wait for the music." He crossed to the aquarium, tapped the glass. The fish scattered, silver bodies flashing like tiny switchblades. I felt the room tilt, floor soft as sponge, walls breathing. My knees wanted to fold. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, but it felt miles away, separated by thick water. He placed the cuffs on the table beside the first set, lining them up, neat, orderly. "One for him," he said, pointing. "One for you, if you insist on staying." The laugh that escaped me was thin, pathetic, a balloon losing air. I backed up a step, heel hitting something soft, clothes, maybe, or something worse. The smell grew teeth, chewed at the inside of my nose. The boy lifted his head again, eyes now unfocused, mouth slack. "Help," he mouthed. No sound, just shape. I couldn't tell if he meant me or the drug or the universe at large. The man lifted the second pair of cuffs, let them dangle, chain clinking like wind chimes made of regret. I reached behind me, fumbling for the door handle, fingers numb, joints stiff. The metal was colder than I expected, burning. He watched, amused, not moving to stop me, confident the room itself would do the work. The latch lifted, but the door didn't budge. Locked. Of course. The man tilted his head, listening to a rhythm only he could hear. "The encore is always better when the audience stays," he said. The boy's head rolled to the side, a slow-motion bow. Somewhere inside the aquarium, one fish floated belly up, pale and still. I pressed my back to the door, heart hammering, waiting for the next click, the next whisper, the next... I didn't breathe until the hallway light flickered back on, the bulb buzzing like a dying wasp. My shoulder blades still pressed against that door. I could feel the cold metal of the lock through my shirt, and somewhere inside the apartment, the cuffs clinked again. Soft, deliberate. That click was a metronome the whole building had learned to obey. Down the corridor, Mrs. Rosario's television volume dropped to a whisper only she could explain. From the stairwell, the smell of boiled cabbage vanished, replaced by something sharper, almost electric. I crept toward the stairs, one shoe squeaking, and every door I passed cracked open just enough for an eye to shine. They were counting, same as me. Apartment 203. Mr. Velasquez, ex-Marine, kept a pocket watch he never wound. He said the ticking inside Dahmer's place did it for him. Every night at 11:17, the thuds began. 3, then 5, then silence. He told me once, voice low, that fifth one is when I pour the bleach down my sink, mask whatever's coming next. He never looked me in the eye when he said it, like shame was contagious. Apartment 205 belonged to the twins, Lila and Lola, barely 19, hair dyed the color of midnight. They burned incense sticks shaped like little skulls, lining them on the windowsill like soldiers. When the smell of chemicals drifted through the vents, they lit 2 more, the smoke curling into question marks. One of them, could never tell which, once pressed a note into my palm. "He smiles when he carries the bag zone, like Santa with presents nobody wants." I still have that scrap of paper, edges greasy from nervous fingers. The elevator never worked, so the staircase became a congregation. At 11:23, we gathered without planning, a silent choir in bathrobes and mismatched socks. Old Mrs. Goldberg would clutch her rosary so tight, the beads left circles in her skin. She claimed the smell reminded her of the camps, a memory she never unpacked for anyone. We just nodded, because what do you say to a ghost that isn't yours? 11:25. The first trash bag appeared, black, industrial, the kind you buy in bulk at the hardware store. Dahmer carried it like it weighed nothing, swinging it gentle, almost playful. The sound was wet, a slap of meat on vinyl. Mr. Velasquez started his stopwatch. Twins lit another skull. Mrs. Goldberg's lips moved faster than her fingers. I counted heartbeats, lost track after 43. Between floors, the air changed, grew heavy, metallic. My tongue tasted pennies. The bag brushed my sneaker as he passed, a streak of something warm. I told myself it was condensation, just water, just summer humidity. But the liquid soaked into the canvas, darkening like an ink blot test, and I saw shapes I still refused to name. 11:28. Second bag. This one smaller, cradled against his chest like a sleeping child. He hummed, no tune I recognized. maybe no tune at all. The hallway lights dimmed again, obedient. I caught the glint of the aquarium behind him, water murky, fish drifting like snow inside a paperweight. One more floated belly up, silver scales catching the strobe of dying electricity. 11:30, final bag. Always the same rhythm, 3 minutes apart, like he rehearsed it. This bag dragged, zipper snagging on the threshold. Something inside shifted, settled. A low thump answered back, as if the contents knew the route by heart. Mrs. Rosario's door clicked shut, final, the way you close a coffin. The twins stopped lighting incense. The hallways smelled only of what we couldn't cover. I followed at a distance, souls silent on the threadbare carpet. Down 3 flights, past the mailboxes nobody used anymore. The basement door waited, mouth open. He never locked it. Why bother when fear did the job? Each step echoed like a drumbeat. I counted again, one for every bag I'd watched disappear. At the bottom, he paused, head cocked, listening. I froze, breath held hostage. Slowly, he turned. Not fully, just enough for the hallway bulb to catch the edge of his glasses. The lenses flashed white. Twin moons. "You're early for the finale," he said, voice soft as dust. Then he stepped into the dark, door swinging shut with a hydraulic sigh. The basement swallowed him, but the smell crawled back up, clung to the walls, to my clothes, to the inside of my mouth. I tasted rust, and something sweeter, like overripe fruit left in the sun. Upstairs, the tenants would reset their clocks, waiting for tomorrow's countdown. But down here, time had already stopped ticking. Somewhere behind that door, a zipper opened. Something rolled across concrete. And then, silence, thicker than any bag. I pressed my ear to the metal, skin sticking, heart hammering out a rhythm only I could hear. I should have left. I should have run. But the smell held me like a leash, pulling me closer. My fingers found the handle, slick with something I didn't want to name. Maybe curiosity really does kill more than cats. From the other side, a single drop hit the floor, plink, followed by another, steady, deliberate. I counted them, same as the bags. 1, 2, 3. Then a soft scrape, metal on stone, and a voice, my own voice, whispered back through the gap. "What happens at 11:33? The handle turned, slow, inviting. The handle gave one last reluctant click, and the drawers slid open on plastic runners that sounded like bones grinding. I wasn't ready for the smell that rolled out. Sweet rod mixed with something metallic, like pennies left in a puddle of syrup. My stomach flipped, but the badge on my chest kept my hand steady. Inside lay a stack of Polaroids, squared edges yellowed, their glossy faces catching the beam of my flashlight like tiny mirrors. I lifted the first one, and the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The photo showed a young man seated on a plaid couch I recognized from the living room, except his head lolled too far to the right, neck bent at an angle that said the bones inside had given up. His eyes were half open, pupils milky, and someone still breathing, had propped a beer bottle between his slack fingers. The second print was worse. This one had been posed like a department store mannequin, arms stiff at 90 degrees, palms up, a plastic crown from a Burger King kids meal tilted on his matted hair. The flash had bounced off his skin, turning it porcelain, almost glowing. I shuffled faster, the stack fluttering like a deck of cursed cards. Each picture was dated in cramped ballpoint, tiny numbers scrawled in the white border, always at night. 11:02, 11:17, 11:33. The dates marched in perfect order, a calendar made of corpses. My thumb stuck to one print. When I peeled it free, the emulsion came away in a sick little curl. Underneath, the next victim lay on the same couch, same pose, only this time, the mouth had been wired into a grin, with what looked like fishing line. Who needs Photoshop when you've got monofilament? I counted them. 1, 2, up to 27, before I noticed the pattern in the backgrounds. The blue room, the neighbor's countdown ticking in my head like a metronome. Every picture had the same crack in the plaster above the headboard, a lightning bolt that hadn't been repaired in years. He wanted them home, even after. The thought crawled across my scalp colder than the basement air. Some faces I recognized from missing person flyers tacked up at the precinct. Others were strangers, their stories erased before anyone thought to ask. A photo near the middle stopped me cold. The body sat upright in a kitchen chair, duct tape sealing the eyelids open, and on the table before him rested a plate with 3 uncooked sausages arranged like smiley eyes and a mouth. The flash had caught the grease gleaming, making the meat look alive. I turned the print over. Someone had written brunch in the same tidy ballpoint. Dark humor, served cold. I could hear my partner breathing through the wall, radio crackling with dispatch codes that suddenly felt ridiculous. Code 6, suspicious odor. Code 4, request coroner. None of the codes covered this. My fingers trembled as I lifted the last picture. It was newer, the colors still vibrant, the skin not yet gray. This victim looked almost peaceful, propped against the same couch, but the hands were folded over a small red book. I tilted the photo toward the light, and the spine came into focus. Holy Bible. Someone had circled a verse in red ink. John chapter 11, verse 33. Jesus wept. The irony tasted like bile. I flipped to the back of the stack and found one more print tucked behind the rest, half the size of the others, as if it had been hidden in a hurry. It was taken from inside the closet, looking out through the slats of the louvered door. In the frame I could see the blue room, the couch, and, my heart hammered, my own silhouette backlit by the hallway bulb. The timestamp read 11:32. I had walked in at 11:31. My flashlight flickered. The bulb popped, died, plunging the room into the same red glow I'd seen pulsing from the basement. Somewhere beneath the floorboards a pipe clanged, steady, deliberate, plink, plink, counting down. I stuffed the photos back in order, but the drawer refused to close. Something wedged in the runner resisted, like a bone caught in a garbage disposal. I reached in, fingers brushing cold metal, and pulled out a tiny key taped to the underside of the drawer bottom. No label, no tag, just teeth worn smooth from use. The red light brightened, seeping up through the cracks in the floor like blood rising. I backed toward the door, key clenched so tight the teeth dug into my palm. The last image in my mind was the almost peaceful face in the final Polaroid. Eyes closed, Bible in his lap. Time-stamped 1 minute before I arrived. 1 minute. 60 lousy seconds between witness and evidence. Behind me, the drawer slammed shut on its own, the plastic runners screaming like a child waking from a nightmare. I spun, heart in my throat, but the room was empty except for the smell. That syrupy metallic rot clung to my clothes, to the photos now sealed in evidence bags, to the key heating up in my fist like it wanted to brand me. I could hear footsteps on the stairs. No, not footsteps, just the echo of my own boots on linoleum magnified by panic. 11:33 is coming. I slipped the key into my pocket, the metal already warm as skin. The red pulse quickened, matching the throb in my temples. Somewhere in the building, a clock chimed the half hour. Once, twice. Then silence. The silence was worse. I stepped into the hallway, leaving the drawer and its ghosts behind, but the smell followed like a loyal dog. Ahead, the basement door stood ajar, darkness breathing through the gap. The key felt heavier with every heartbeat, as if it knew exactly where it belonged. 11:33. The lock waited below, patient and hungry. I told myself backup was on the way, that I should wait, that protocol existed for a reason. Protocol never met a Polaroid that predicted your arrival. I took 1 step, 2, the key's teeth cutting a crescent into my skin. From the stairwell came a sound, not dripping, not scraping, just a single soft click, metal kissing metal. The lock was already turning without me. The smell thickened, sweet and coppery, wrapping around my throat like a garrote. I reached for my radio, but the words wouldn't come. What happens at 11:33? The darkness answered with another click. Closer now, and the red light went out. I never meant to play that tape. It was just one of those forgotten microcassettes that lived in the answering machine on Mrs. Rosali's kitchen counter, its plastic shell yellowed like old teeth. She pressed it into my hand the way you hand over a live grenade, fingers trembling, whispering she'd found it wedged behind the radiator after the police left. She told me she'd recorded it by accident months ago, meant to catch a prank caller who kept breathing heavy at 3 in the morning. Instead, she got this, whatever this was, captured between the beep and the hang-up. I slid it into my pocket without thinking, like picking up a penny you find on the sidewalk. That was the first mistake. Back in my car, windows fogged with the night's breath, I fed the tape into the handheld recorder I kept for witness interviews. The hiss rose first, that familiar ocean sound of cheap ferric oxide, and then nothing. 10 seconds of static. 20. I was about to eject it when the drill began. Not the mechanical whine you expect from a Black & Decker, no. This was intimate, wet, like the world's worst dentist kissing bone. It started low, almost polite, then climbed into a shriek that made my fillings ache. Beneath it, something softer, a moan maybe, or a sigh through clenched teeth. God, that sound. It had rhythm, pratcheet, pushed deeper, like a lover who refuses to take no for an answer. I felt my stomach fold in on itself. The neighbor's clock radio bled through at the edges, a muffled love song from the easy listening station. Barry Manilow serenading a vivisection. The drill paused, just long enough for me to hope it was over. And then came the crack. Not a snap like dry wood. This was wetter, thicker, the sound of a wishbone giving up. I had to pull over, dry heaving into the footwell while the tape kept spinning, merciless, inside the machine. When I could breathe again, the drill had changed pitch. It was humming now, satisfied, the way a cat purrs over a dead bird. That's when I heard the voice, his voice, soft and conversational, like he was asking about the weather. There, he said, that should do it. Just that. 3 words, and the tape clicked off into silence, so complete I thought I'd gone deaf. My hands shook too hard to rewind it. I just sat there, watching my breath frost the windshield, wondering how many other tapes were out there, forgotten, waiting. Mrs. Rosales hadn't mentioned the date. I checked the counter stamp, November 3rd, 10:37 p.m., and felt the timeline rearrange itself in my head like shuffled tarot cards. That was the night the smell first started seeping into the hallway, sweet and wrong, the night the building's pipes rattled with something heavier than water. I'd walked those halls the next morning, notebook in hand, knocking on doors nobody answered. Now I knew why. They were listening too. Back inside apartment 219, the air was soup. I flicked my flashlight across the workbench and saw the drill still plugged in, its bit dark to the first knurling. The chuck was warm. I touched it without thinking and jerked back like I'd been burned. There were smears on the handle, rust brown, already flaking. I thought of the Polaroids in the drawer, the way the faces looked both surprised and resigned, and suddenly the room tilted. I had to grip the bench to stay upright. The tape had more. I hadn't noticed at first because the levels were so low, but now, cranked up in my headphones, I heard it. Footsteps, soft and deliberate, crossing what sounded like plastic sheeting. A pause, then water running, lots of it, followed by the metallic scrape of something heavy being dragged. He was cleaning up. The faucet shut off. Silence again, but not empty, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I rewound, played it again, and this time caught the whisper underneath the water. Counting. 1, 2, 3, up to 7. Then stop. I checked my watch. 11:29. 4 minutes until whatever happened at 11:33. My radio crackled, dispatch asking for my location, but I couldn't speak. The drill's whisper had crawled inside my head, nested there, and every beat of my heart sounded like that bit-chewing bone. I should have called for backup. I should have left. Instead, I pressed rewind one more time. This time, the tape gave up a new secret, a second voice, faint, almost swallowed by static, but unmistakably human. Please, it said, drawn out like a sigh. Not again. Then the drill started once more, angrier now, as if insulted by the interruption. I ripped the headphones off, the cord whipping across my cheek like a wire brush. My reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger's, eyes too wide, mouth working soundlessly. The answering machine's red light blinked twice. Low battery, maybe, or a warning. I couldn't tell. The smell in the apartment shifted. grew sharper, like pennies held under the tongue. I realized I was standing in the exact spot the Polaroid had been taken. The camera's angle burned into my retinas. Somewhere behind the drywall, pipes groaned. The drill's echo, or something worse. I pocketed the tape, fingers sticky with sweat, and turned toward the door. That's when the hallway bulb flickered and died, plunging everything into velvet black. I froze, every horror movie cliché screaming in my skull. But the darkness wasn't empty. It had weight. It had breath. And from somewhere deep inside the building, maybe 219, maybe the space between walls, came the softest sound, a drill bit touching bone, testing, ready to begin again. 11:33. The lock behind me clicked. The darkness from the hallway clung to me like wet cloth as I stepped back into apartment 219. The air was thicker now, metallic, like someone had left a faucet of blood running in the sink. I could still hear that drill somewhere, a phantom whine echoing behind the walls, as if the building itself was being hollowed out from within. Tracy Edwards was still handcuffed to the chair when I found him again. Only this time, he wasn't screaming. He wasn't even crying. He was still. Too still. His head was tilted forward, chin to chest, like a man praying or already gone. But his fingers moved. Just barely, twitching like a dying spider. I crouched beside him, heart punching against my ribs. "Tracy," I whispered. "You with me?" He didn't answer at first. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes were wide, pupils blown, like he'd seen something that erased the inside of him. Blood had dried in rust-brown streaks down his wrists where the cuffs had bitten through skin. But under his right thumb, something glinted. A key. I felt it when he turned me over, Tracy rasped, voice barely a thread. He didn't see, I think. I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. I reached out, slow, like he was a deer that might bolt. "You're okay. You're still here. That's something." He let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, wasn't quite a sob. He said he was going to take another picture, said I looked peaceful, like I was already dead. The camera was still on the dresser, just out of reach. The drawer beneath it, the one we'd opened before, was slightly ajar. I could see the edge of a photo sticking out, something pale. Something that didn't look like it had ever been alive. Tracy's breathing hitched. He went to the kitchen, said he needed a drink first, that he wanted to clean up. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know. Instead, I looked at the key again. It was small, cheap, the kind you'd find in a junk drawer or taped under a mailbox. But it was real. It was there. "You've got one shot," I said. "One." He nodded, jaw clenched so tight I heard his teeth creak. "I know." I moved behind him, careful not to jostle the chair. The cuffs were tight, too tight, but the keyhole was visible, just barely. Tracy twisted his wrist, wincing as the metal scraped bone. "Turn it slow," I said. "Don't force it." He did. The key slid in with a soft click. But nothing happened. He froze. It stuck. "No," I said. "It's just old. Try again." Gentle. He turned it again, this time with a breath held so long I thought he might pass out. Click. The cuff on his right wrist popped open like a jaw. Tracy didn't move, not at first. He just stared at his freed hand like it belonged to someone else. Then, slowly, he brought it to his lap, flexing his fingers with the wonder of a man who'd forgotten what freedom felt like. "He's coming back," he whispered. "I heard the fridge open. He's getting the ice." I stood. "Then we go now." But Tracy didn't stand. He looked at the dresser, at the drawer, at the Polaroid still peeking out like a tongue. "I want to see," he said. "I need to know what he—" "No," I snapped. "We don't have time." But he was already moving, slower than a dream, reaching for the photo with trembling fingers. I grabbed his wrist. "Tracy!" He looked at me. Really looked. And I saw it then. Not fear, not even pain. Just something hollow, like the man he'd been had already walked out of his body and left this shell behind. I saw him, Tracy said, before, when he thought I was asleep. He was talking to them, like they could hear him. I swallowed hard. We have to go. He nodded, finally, stood. The chair scraped against the floor with a sound like a scream. We moved toward the door, slow, careful. The hallway beyond was still dark, still breathing. But just as we stepped over the threshold, Tracy stopped. He turned back. "What are you doing?" I hissed. He didn't answer, just reached into his pocket and pulled something out. "I took it," he said, "from the drawer. Just one. I don't know why." I looked at the photo. I didn't want to, but I did. And then, the hallway light flickered. A shadow moved. And from the kitchen, the sound of ice cubes dropping into a glass. One by one. I could still hear the ice cubes falling, that hollow clink in the glass, like someone counting down the last seconds of my life. The hallway bulb blinked once, twice, then steadied on a sickly yellow. I clutched the tiny handcuff key so hard it bit into my palm. Jeffrey's shadow didn't move, not really. It just stretched, longer, thinner, like it wanted to touch me before he did. I backed up until the small of my knees hit the edge of his lounge chair, the one with the cracked vinyl that always smelled of sour milk and something sweet gone wrong. My left wrist was still locked to the armrest, the cuff cutting deep. The key trembled between my fingers, too small, too quiet against the monster's breathing somewhere out of sight. Then the chair itself shifted under me, like the apartment was leaning forward to watch. I felt the cuff give the tiniest click. Not open, not yet. Just teasing. A cruel little joke. I twisted my wrist again, felt the metal scrape skin, and the cuff popped free. Cold air rushed over the raw circle it left behind. I didn't cheer. I didn't breathe. I just stood, slow, like rising from a grave. Somewhere behind the kitchen wall, glass shattered. I took one step. The floorboard groaned like it knew my name. Another step. The apartment seemed to exhale, a low moan through the vents. My bare foot landed on something wet and sticky. I didn't look down. I couldn't. The key was still in my fist, slick now with blood and sweat. "Keep moving, Tracy. Keep moving." A chair crashed. Not mine. His. Jeffrey's. The sound of wood on tile, violent, sudden. He was coming. I felt it in my teeth and the roots of my hair. I lunged for the door, shoulder first, and the flimsy thing almost gave, but the deadbolt mocked me, brass and stubborn. My fingers fumbled for the chain, missed, fumbled again. Behind me, footsteps, deliberate, measured, not running, never running. He knew I wasn't going anywhere. The chain slid free with a rattle like bones. I grabbed the knob, turned, locked. Of course it was locked. My heart punched against my ribs. A hysterical giggle escaped me. The key in my hand wasn't for the deadbolt. It was just a tiny sliver of hope, useless against the fortress he called home. Then I remembered the spare. He kept one above the frame, tucked behind a warped piece of molding. I stretched, fingers brushing dust and cobwebs. And yes, metal, cold, real. I jammed it into the lock just as the hallway light flickered again and went out completely. Total darkness. No bulb, no glow. Just the red exit sign bleeding through the peephole like a distant warning. The lock turned. One clean click. I pulled the door open, and the hallway beyond smelled of mildew and old pizza. Ordinary and beautiful. I stepped through. The carpet was rough under my soles, but it was carpet, not that sticky kitchen linoleum. I was out. I was actually out. A breath hitched in my throat, half sob, half laugh. Behind me, Jeffrey's voice rose, low and calm. "Tracy." Just my name. No anger, no rush, like he was asking me to pass the salt. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My legs were already sprinting, bare feet slapping the worn carpet, past 219, past 221, the numbers blurring. The stairwell door stood at the end, heavy metal, painted the color of dried blood. I slammed into it, shoulder bruising, and it flew open. Cold concrete underfoot now, the smell of rust and piss. Down, down, 2 steps at a time. My ankle twisted on the landing, but pain was a luxury I couldn't afford. The key in my fist rattled against the railing like a bell. Halfway down, I heard the apartment door above me creak open again. Not slammed, just opened. He was watching. I felt his eyes on my back, colder than the night outside. I didn't look up. Couldn't. The last flight blurred. My knees buckled at the bottom, but I pushed through the lobby door and into the street. The night air hit me like holy water. Exhaust fumes, wet asphalt, freedom. I ran. East, west. I didn't know. My lungs burned. Somewhere behind me, a car door slammed. Not his. Couldn't be his. He didn't drive, did he? I clutched the keys so tight it left a perfect imprint in my palm. Evidence. Proof. The word tasted metallic. I needed help. Real help. Not the kind that came with handcuffs and Polaroids. A payphone glinted under a busted street lamp. I dove for it, fingers shaking as I lifted the receiver. No coins. Of course. I slammed it down, spun around. The street was empty, but I knew better. He was out here somewhere, walking slow, savoring the hunt. Then I saw the cruiser again, still idling. I sprinted toward it, bare feet slapping wet pavement. The driver looked up, startled, coffee spilling onto his lap. I yanked the passenger door open before he could speak. "Help me," I panted. "Please, 219. Apartment 219. He... My voice cracked like a dropped plate. The officer's eyes dropped to my wrist, to the raw circle of bruises and blood. His radio crackled to life. But before he could answer, before he could even reach for his mic, I felt it, that same cold stare from somewhere beyond the windshield. I turned. Across the street, under the awning of a 24-hour laundromat, a tall silhouette stood motionless, hands in pockets, watching. The red neon sign buzzed above him, painting everything the color of fresh meat. The officer followed my gaze. "You know that guy?" he asked, voice low. I swallowed. The key in my fist felt heavier now, like it wanted to drag me back. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because what if he followed me here? What if he never stopped following? And in the rearview mirror, just as the first siren began to wail in the distance, I saw the silhouette lift one hand. Not a wave, not quite. Just a slow, deliberate gesture, fingers curling inward, as if to say, "I'll be seeing you." The cruiser's engine roared to life. I gripped the door handle, knuckles white. The siren's howl grew louder, closer, until it swallowed every other sound on the block. I could feel the cruiser's brakes bite, the tires hissing against wet asphalt as we skidded to a stop outside Oxford Apartments. Red and blue lights painted the brick like cheap carnival paint, flickering across the broken windows of apartment 219. Officer Routh was first out, hand on his holster. "Which unit?" he barked. I pointed up the stairwell, throat raw from shouting. 219, end of the hall. You'll smell it before you see it. The words tasted metallic, like I'd bitten my own tongue. Routh exchanged a look with his partner, Mueller, young, eyes too wide for this kind of night. They both knew the smell. Every cop does, sooner or later. We started up the stairs, boots thudding on stained carpet that squelched underfoot. The building felt wrong, like it had been holding its breath for years, and now only exhaled rot. Halfway up, the air changed. Sweet, cloying, threaded with something sharp, formaldehyd and spoiled meat. Mueller gagged, pulled his collar over his nose. "Jesus, what is that?" I didn't answer, couldn't. My stomach was already folding in on itself. At the top landing, the hallway stretched like a tunnel, the bulb over 219 buzzing louder than any insect had a right to buzz. Tracy stood beside the door, barefoot, wrists rubbed raw. She looked smaller than before, shoulders shaking even though the night wasn't cold. When she saw the uniforms, her knees buckled. "He's still in there," she whispered, voice cracking like old vinyl. He said he'd be right back." The terror in her eyes was a living thing, clawing at the edges of her lashes. Routh raised his fist, 3 sharp knocks, too polite for what waited behind that slab of painted wood. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. Then a low mechanical hum from inside, steady and patient, like a refrigerator keeping secrets. The knob didn't turn. Mallor glanced at me, then at Tracy. Key? She shook her head, hair sticking to tear-streaked cheeks. Ralph didn't wait. He stepped back, shoulder lowered. 1, 2, 3. The doorframe splintered with a sound like a bone giving way. The smell hit us full in the face. Not just decay, something chemical, medicinal, mixed with the copper tang of blood gone sour. My eyes watered instantly. Mallor staggered, hand over mouth. The apartment was darker than the hallway, lit only by the yellow bulb over the stove and the green glow of a humming aquarium. Then Tracy did the bravest thing I've ever seen. She pushed past us, bare feet slapping linoleum, and jabbed a trembling finger at the far wall. "Look," she rasped. The Polaroids. Dozens of them. Some curling at the edges, others fresh and glossy, all of them. I can't describe what they showed. Faces I didn't recognize, contorted in ways no living face should ever hold. The camera's flash had bleached skin to parchment, eyes to black pinpricks. They were taped in neat rows, a gallery no one ever asked to curate. Roth's hand moved instinctively to his radio, but the words caught in his throat. Mueller stared, mouth open, as if he'd forgotten how to breathe. I felt the room tilt, the floor soft under my boots like rotted wood ready to give. A low click behind us. The refrigerator door, heavy, industrial, stood ajar by an inch. From inside, the hum deepened, vibrating through my ribs, like a second heart. Tracy took one step toward it, then froze. "Don't open it," she breathed. "Please." But the word please was already too late. Routh reached out, gloved hand closing around the handle. The rubber seal gave, with a wet pop. Cold air rolled out, carrying the stench of chilled meat and something sharper. Ozone, maybe, or fear crystallized. I didn't look long, couldn't. My gaze slid past the plastic wraps, the tidy labels written in block letters, and fixed instead on the bottom shelf. A single mason jar, lid screwed tight, contents murky. Something floated inside, pale and shapeless. I told myself it was a trick of the light, told myself lots of things in that moment. McGuller turned away, retching into the sink. The faucet dripped a slow, rhythmic plink, 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 like a metronome counting down. Tracy backed into the corner, arms hugging herself so hard I heard her shoulders creak. "He said he'd be right back," she repeated, voice hollow. "But he always says that." From the hallway, footsteps. Not hurried, not running, just measured, deliberate. Ralph spun, hand on weapon. Mueller straightened, wiping his mouth. I felt the room shrink, walls pressing closer, the Polaroids fluttering in the draft like they were trying to speak. The footsteps stopped just outside. A key scraped metal, slow, taunting. The knob began to turn. I looked at Tracy. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the opening door, pupils blown so large they looked like drops of ink. "Hide," she mouthed. But there was nowhere to go. The refrigerator still hummed, louder now, like it was laughing at us. The smell thickened, coating my tongue until I could taste every secret this place had ever kept. The door swung inward, and then... The door swung inward, and the red-blue pulse of the squad car lights poured over the threshold like liquid panic. I felt the floor tilt, or maybe it was my knees giving up, because suddenly I was staring at 2 polished black shoes and the hem of a navy blue uniform. The officer's flashlight beam swept the room, catching the Polaroids first, those awful little squares, before sliding across the refrigerator, the stained mattress, and finally resting on Tracy and me like a spotlight from hell. The smell that had been thick before now turned solid, pushing against my chest until I had to breathe through my mouth or risk retching on the spot. Somewhere behind the officer, radios crackled with voices that sounded tinny and far away, yet they filled the apartment with a frantic energy that made the refrigerator hum feel almost polite. I remember thinking how absurd it was that a fridge could still be polite while surrounded by, well, by what we were about to learn. The officer spoke, but the words blurred. All I caught was forensics and clear the scene. Then more boots thundered up the stairs, and the hallway became a tunnel of echoing authority. They moved like a practiced dance troupe, each carrying numbered tags, cameras, plastic sheeting that snapped open with a sound like distant gunfire. One woman knelt beside the refrigerator and opened it the rest of the way, and the smell rolled out in a wave so cold it burned. I didn't want to look, but my eyes betrayed me, tracing the outlines of mason jars, each labeled with dates in neat block letters. Dates that should have been birthdays, not expiration labels. Tracy's hand found mine, fingers trembling like trapped birds. They began the inventory. I heard the click of a Polaroid camera, then another, then so many it sounded like applause for a show nobody asked to attend. The lead tech, a tall man with latex gloves the color of bone, called out numbers in a voice flat enough to skate on. Item 1, skull, bleached. His partner echoed, Item 1 confirmed. But when I blinked, the tag on the evidence bag read Item 2. I rubbed my eyes. The bag now said Item 4. The numbers were sliding, refusing to stay put, like they were embarrassed to claim ownership. A second skull emerged from a lower cabinet, wrapped in a towel patterned with faded sailboats, innocent little boats on an ocean of terry cloth horror. The absurdity caught in my throat, because who buys towels like that and then uses them for, well, for that? The tech cleared his throat and said, Item 11, even though we had only counted 3 so far. I started to protest, but Tracy squeezed my hand so hard I felt her nails. Don't, she whispered. They see it too. They pulled out 4 torsos, just the cores of people, like someone had erased the limbs and heads from a sketch. Each torso went into its own black bag, and each bag got a tag, but every time I looked, the tag had changed. Item 9 became Item 6. Item 6 became Item 12. I started counting on my fingers, trying to anchor the chaos, but my hands shook so badly I lost track after 7. The room felt tilted again, like the apartment itself couldn't decide which way was up. Then came the vat. It sat in the bathtub, a white plastic barrel with a lid that looked too innocent for its purpose. When they pried it open, the acid hissed, not loudly, just a soft exhale as if it had been waiting to speak. The smell shifted, sharper now, like vinegar left too long in the sun. Inside floated fragments I refused to identify, but the numbers on the rim of the barrel kept rewriting themselves in chalk that would not stick. Item 15, Item 3, Item 8. I closed my eyes and still saw them rearranging, like a countdown that refused to reach 0. A detective stepped beside me, notebook open, pen poised. You see the numbers move, he asked, voice low. I nodded. He scribbled something, then frowned at the page. The ink had smeared into shapes that looked almost like numerals, but not quite. Happens to all of us, he muttered. Place doesn't like being cataloged. I wanted to ask what that meant, but the techs were lifting the barrel, and the apartment groaned, floorboards creaking like old bones protesting the loss of weight. One skull rolled from a shelf, bounced once on the carpet, and stared at me with empty sockets that somehow looked accusatory. The tag on it read, Item 0. I swear it wasn't there a moment before. Item 0, the number before counting even begins. The detective closed his notebook with a snap that echoed like a judge's gavel. We're taking you both downtown, he said, but his eyes stayed on the skull, as if waiting for it to speak first. I felt the room shift again, a slow rotation that only my inner ear seemed to notice. Somewhere in the walls, pipes began to hum, not water, not heat, just a low vibration that matched the refrigerator's earlier laughter. The numbers on every bag, every tag, every jar, flickered once, then settled into a single sequence, 1 through 11. Then silence. And that's when I heard it, a whisper from the hallway. Not from any throat, just air forming words. Inventory complete, it said. But the count is never done. I looked at Tracy. Her lips didn't move, yet her voice was inside my head, soft and terrified. What if we're next on the list? The detective motioned us toward the stairs, but the apartment exhaled one last time, and I swear the smell followed us like a shadow. As we stepped over the threshold, the door didn't close behind us. It just stood open, waiting. I could still taste the copper in the air when the detective's flashlight swept the stairwell. The bulb flickered like it didn't want to see what was next. One by one, the tenants emerged from their doors, blinking at the sudden brightness as though they'd forgotten the sun existed. Mrs. Kowalski, from 204, hugged a plastic grocery bag to her chest like it might stop her heart from falling out. She whispered, I kept telling myself it was just bad meat, and the words curdled between us. I didn't answer, couldn't, because the smell had already changed. The rot had surrendered to something sharper, cleaner, and somehow worse. Bleach has a way of screaming where decay only moaned. The detective muttered into his radio, start them down the front stairs, single file, and the hallway obeyed with the obedience of a graveyard. Funny how people fall into lines when the Reaper's doing crowd control. A kid in dinosaur pajamas shuffled past, his bare feet leaving wet prints that looked too much like tiny ghosts. I almost reached out to steady him, but Tracy caught my wrist. Don't, she said, voice cracking like old ice. He doesn't need our fingerprints on him, too. Down we went, each step creaking the same confession. We lived above a charnel house and never knew. Or maybe we knew and just breathed through our mouths. Either way, the building itself seemed to exhale, pushing us out like poison from a wound. On the second-floor landing, the stench staged its last rebellion. It wasn't the sweet, stomach-turning funk of earlier. It was a chemical ghost wearing the mask of cleanliness. You'll never scrub me out, it hissed between the cracks, and I swear the banister trembled. I looked back up the stairwell. Apartment 219's door was still open, a black rectangle cut into the dim. No light inside, just absence. The detective noticed too. He clicked his tongue, a small wet sound of disgust, then pulled the door shut. The latch clicked like a coffin nail. And still, the smell followed us, obedient as a dog that's tasted blood. Outside, the night was too quiet for a city. Sirens had already come and gone, leaving only the low hum of generators and the soft weeping of people who'd forgotten how to pray. A news van idled at the curb, its satellite dish tilted like a vulture's neck. I wanted to yell, "You're late, he's already inside us," but my voice felt wrapped in gauze. Tracy leaned against the wrought iron fence, eyes closed, counting breaths she hadn't earned. I watched her lips move, 1, 2, 3, and wondered if the victims had counted the same way. An officer handed out thin gray blankets that smelled like mothballs in old jail. Mrs. Kowalski draped hers over the kid's shoulders, tucking him in as if bedtime could still exist. Except no story ever started with, once upon a time, the monster lived upstairs. A paramedic approached, latex gloves snapping like tiny firecrackers. Anyone need oxygen? He asked, and half the line raised a hand. Not for our lungs, buddy, for our memories. I took a mask anyway, pressed the plastic to my face, and inhaled the metallic hiss. It tasted like forgetting, but I knew forgetting wasn't on the menu tonight. Across the street, neighbors watched from behind curtains, faces pale smudges against yellow windows. Look away, I wanted to tell them. Nothing to see here but the smell of what you never noticed. But they kept staring, same way you stare at a car crash, hoping the metal will explain itself. A camera flash popped, bleaching the brick wall white for half a heartbeat. Somewhere inside that burst, I thought I saw a shadow still wearing Jeffrey's shape, lingering in the stairwell like smoke that refuses to leave. The detective lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. He offered me one. I took it, even though I quit years ago. The smoke tasted like burning libraries, every page a life we hadn't saved. We'll need statements, he said, voice flat as asphalt. Start with when you first smelled it. I laughed then, a dry sound that startled even me. You want me to calendar my nose? He didn't smile. None of us did. Behind us, the building stood dark, every window an eye gouged out. I could feel it watching, counting how many of us would come back tomorrow. 0, I hoped. But hope is a weak disinfectant. A van marked Biohazard rolled up, its back doors yawning like a second mouth. Workers in white suits began unloading barrels that stank of stronger bleach. They moved with the bored efficiency of people who scrub history for a living. One of them dropped a jug. It shattered. spreading a clear puddle that reflected the moon like a shard of mirror. For a second, I saw Tracy's face in it, mouth open in a silent scream. Then the liquid ate the reflection, and she was just standing beside me again, solid and shaking. She whispered, "Do you think they'll get it all?" I didn't answer. We both knew some stains sink straight to the soul. Sometime after midnight, they led us back across the police line, one at a time, to grab essentials. No one wanted to go first. I volunteered, maybe to prove I could. The stairwell was colder now, the banister sticky with fresh disinfectant. Each footstep echoed like a dropped penny in an empty well. When I reached the second floor, the chemical fog was so thick I tasted it on my teeth. The door to 219 was sealed with red tape, but the edges still breathed, pulsing like a wound deciding whether to close. I hurried past, grabbed my duffel, and fled. Behind me, the building inhaled, slow and deliberate, as if saving room for the next nightmare. Outside again, the crowd had thinned to shadows and questions. The detective tucked his notebook away, nodded once, and walked off without saying goodbye. Maybe goodbyes felt too permanent tonight. Tracy and I stood on the sidewalk, blankets around our shoulders like failed armor. A cold wind lifted the smell of bleach and carried it down the block, past the church, past the river, until even the city seemed to flinch. "It's not over," the wind said, borrowing Tracy's voice. She looked at me, eyes wide, and I realized she hadn't spoken. Somewhere inside the building, something shifted, wood creaking, or maybe bones settling. I couldn't tell, but I knew we'd left the door open in our minds, and the smell had followed us home. And that's when I felt it again, that invisible hand on the back of my neck, gentle as a lover, cold as a drawer in the morgue. Turr. I didn't turn around. I just started walking, heart tap dancing against my ribs, because I finally understood the inventory wasn't complete. The building had exhaled, but something else was inhaling, and we were still inside its lungs. The building had exhaled, but something else was inhaling, and we were still inside its lungs. That's what I told myself as I walked away. Yet the truth is simpler and uglier. The smell never really left me. I'd catch it on the sleeve of an old jacket, or rising from the drain when the hot water first hit. Neighbors said the same thing. On thick summer nights, when the air hung like wet wool, a ghost of pork and bleach would drift down the block and park itself on their tongues. They tore the place down brick by brick, men in white helmets and yellow tape, but every swing of the wrecking ball felt like slapping water. The smell only laughed and clung to the dust. A year later, the lot was paved over, turned into a parking deck nobody wanted to use after sunset. Still, when the first snow melted each March, the asphalt sweated that same sweet rot perfume, and the attendants left the gates open just to keep the ghosts moving. I went back once, just once, because curiosity is a leash made of questions. The new concrete smelled of tar and fresh paint, yet underneath, faint as a heartbeat, the old odor pulsed. I pressed my palm to the ground and swear it felt warmer there, like something beneath was still breathing. A security guard watched from his booth, eyes ringed with sleepless purple, and when I asked if he ever noticed anything strange, he only said, "Only every night, mister." Years slid by like cars on a wet highway. I moved twice, changed my number, even tried a different cologne, something sharp and piney that made me smell like Christmas. Didn't matter. The scent followed, threading itself through grocery aisles, subway cars, first dates. Once, during a kiss, the woman pulled back and whispered, "Do you smell bleach?" I laughed too loud, too fast, and the moment folded like cheap metal. I started dreaming in smells instead of pictures. In the dream, apartment 219 was still standing, windows lit from within by a dull orange glow, and the hallways stretched longer every time I stepped inside. The carpet squished underfoot, warm and wet, and I knew without looking that the walls were sweating. At the far end, the door stood ajar, breathing slow and regular, inviting me to come inventory what I'd missed. I always woke before crossing the threshold, throat raw, tasting pennies. Therapists have words for this: olfactory flashback, trauma echo, but words are just nets that let the real thing swim through. I learned to live alongside it, like a roommate who never pays rent, but occasionally cooks breakfast. Some nights, when the moon is swollen and the air feels pregnant, I sit on the fire escape and let the city wash over me. Diesel, river rot, cheap pizza, and then, threading through it all, that unmistakable cocktail of meat and disinfectant. I began collecting stories. The woman in 215, now gray and soft-voiced, told me she still throws out her trash at 3 in the morning because that's when the smell is quietest. Like it's sleeping, she said, eyes darting toward the dark hallway. The janitor who mops the lobby of the new building swears the mop water turns pink every June, no matter how many times he changes it. He crosses himself and keeps scrubbing because rent doesn't pay itself. One humid August evening, I stood outside the former address, now just numbers stenciled on a concrete pillar, and felt the air gather itself. A storm was pushing in from the lake, pressure dropping like a guilty conscience. The lot was empty except for a single sedan idling with its lights off. Inside, a silhouette sat motionless, maybe waiting, maybe remembering. For a moment, I thought it was my own reflection, older and thinner, but then the car rolled forward and vanished into the rain. I stood there drenched, tasting lightning and pork fat on the same tongue. People ask if I want the smell to disappear. I used to say yes, quickly, like ripping off a bandage. Now, I'm not sure. That odor is the last honest witness, the only thing that never lied about what happened behind those walls. When it visits, it brings the weight of every missing minute, every muffled cry, every drop of bleach measured out like mercy. It reminds me that forgetting is just another word for letting the story die. I have a daughter now. She's 8 and fearless, the kind of kid who names spiders and rides her bike with no hands. Last week she burst inside, cheeks flushed, waving a mason jar like a trophy. "I caught a cloud," she shouted. I took the jar, expecting dust or maybe a lightning bug. Instead, the faintest thread of that old scent curled out. Pork, bleach, and something metallic. She must have scooped air from the alley where the building once stood. We stared at the jar together, 2 generations breathing the same ghost. I thought about pouring it out, washing the jar, pretending it never happened. Instead, I tightened the lid and placed it on the highest shelf, next to her baby teeth and the first story I ever wrote about that night. One day, she'll ask why I kept it. I'll tell her the truth. Some smells aren't meant to fade. They're meant to teach us how to breathe around them. Tonight, the air is thick again, and I can feel it prowling the edges of the neighborhood. I open every window, let the city sounds tumble in. Sirens, laughter, the distant thud of music. Somewhere between the living and the gone, the scent drifts, neither welcome nor unwelcome, just present. A reminder that places can be erased, but stories cling to the lungs. I sit on the front steps, jar beside me, and breathe in deep. The smell is softer now, wrapped in summer roses and charcoal from someone's grill, but still unmistakable. I tip my face to the sky, where the first stars are punching through the haze, and make a quiet bargain. I will carry this as long as I must, not like a wound, but like a map. And when my daughter is older, when she's ready, I'll hand her the jar and say, "This is how we remember." Because the building is gone, the bones are dust, and the files are closed. But the smell lingers, not as a curse, but as a covenant. It says, "I was here, we were here, and we will not let the dark swallow the details." So I breathe it in, every humid night, every cold dawn, until the story and the air are the same thing. And when I exhale, I send it forward, a whisper carried on every wind, so that forgetting becomes the one odor this world will never keep.